I'm going to show you guys how to build this modular pegboard system. Now, in my previous video, I built a pegboard system that was mounted directly to the wall and wasn't removable. So because I have so many different hobbies and I like working on different things, I want to be able to reorganize my garage whenever I want. And so this is the solution that I came up with. Now, each of these panels are going to be 2 feet wide, or I cut it down a little bit, 22 inches by 4 feet. And so each of these boards are going to hold a different set of tools for a different purpose. And so that's the reason I'm going with this design. I did have a lot of comments in my previous video and some changes that I've made because I think they were great ideas. The biggest one being washers put onto the screws holding the pegboard on, and I glued the pegboard to the frame, which hopefully will hold a little better over time. Now, these are super easy to build. I'm only going to show you how to build one of these. I'm going to build 6, build a couple tracks around the garage and different walls, which will give me the option to reorganize the garage whenever I need. So if you guys could give me a thumbs up, that would be really awesome. It helps me continue to provide some really helpful videos for people as I do projects myself. And hit that subscribe button if you want to see some more videos that I make. Let's get to it.
So the first step is to set your table saw to the width in which you want your pegboard, and then go ahead and cut those sheets down.
Make sure you guys wear your dust mask when you're cutting this stuff, because it's an MDF material. It's got a lot of glue, a lot of fine sawdust in it, so I do wear this when I do most of my woodworking, but it's really important when you're cutting this MDF material.
Next, you're going to take your 1x4 material and cut it down to the size in which you want your frame. I'm building these 4 feet by 22 inches wide, and so my vertical pieces are going to be 48 inches tall, and then the side pieces, I need to subtract the width of each board because they will sit inside of the vertical pieces. 22 minus 8 is 14, and so the top and bottom pieces I cut down to 14 inches. Next, we're going to bust out our Craig jig. It's probably one of the most used tools that I have in my garage for woodworking, just because it's so versatile. You can use it in so many different joints. I'm going to set the depth to 3/4 of an inch, and I'll do the same thing for the drill bit. However, I always back the drill bit off just a little bit so that the screw has a little bit more material to go into, so that I don't push that screw out the other end of the board, which has happened to me before. Go ahead and get your clamp set up real nice and snug and get these pocket holes drilled. I am doing 4 boards, but you will only need 3 boards for your pegboard if you're following my design exactly. Also, because I don't have a workbench that I've built or purchased yet, I am using my table saw, and so get all of your materials, mock it up on the table saw, because what I noticed was the center support took up a little bit too much room on the pegboard, and because I want to utilize a lot of that space in the middle of that pegboard, I went ahead and cut that center support down right down the middle. And so set your table saw to cut that board right in the middle, but do remember your blade thickness if you want those boards to be exactly the same. I do really like using the Craig screws because they have a flat bottom at the very top of the head, which allows that screw to really pull that material closer to the joining material. And so you can use basic wood screws, but what I found is that the top end of that screw is tapered and it just doesn't pull the pieces of materials closer together as well as these Craig screws do. So it is worth the little bit of extra money that you're going to pay for these Craig screws. And so go ahead and get all of those Craig screws put into your Craig joints, and we should have that frame finished up here. Now this next step is really important because it sets this pegboard design apart from any others, And what we're going to do is attach a French cleat system to the back of this so that we can move it around different parts of the garage if we want. So go ahead and get your material cut to the thickness of your entire pegboard, which for me is 22 inches. Then you're going to set your table saw to 30 degrees. I like 30 degrees for my French cleat systems, and then you're just going to rip that board all the way down at 30 degrees, and we should be good to go. So if you're planning to cut your wall support for your French cleat system later on, just go ahead and lower your blade on your table saw and then leave it in that position so that the next time you raise it up, it'll be the same angle in which you cut your original piece, and so that they'll match up really well. Make sure that when you attach this French cleat board to the top of your pegboard frame, the sharp end is facing down so that it holds up that pegboard system really well. It's important to make sure that you do this in the right spot because we're going to be gluing this on the back so that it holds really well and then screwing it to the frame. I do use the Craig clamp when I do this because the glue tends to make the pieces float around, and so I get a really nice straight piece attached to my frame. I go ahead and use that clamp. I'm not using any scientific method to attach a certain number of screws. I just decided to use 6 screws for the top and bottom, and I figured it was enough of those to get that glue to set in really well. Now we're going to do the same thing for the bottom. Make sure the sharp end is pointing down. Throw some glue on there, clamp it. And I did use the top of the bottom support to make sure that this board was nice and straight and square, so that when I put this on the wall, it's going to hold that pegboard to the wall really secure. Now this is a step that I thought of at the last moment, and that was to glue the pegboard onto the frame. I figured it would give it a little bit more strength because I had a ton of comments from my first video in which people were worried about the pegboard coming off of the wall or off of the frame. I didn't use any washers in that previous frame. I didn't have any problems though with the pegboard coming off the wall. However, because this pegboard system can be moved or can be scooted over to a different location, I want to make sure that this thing is really secure. And so that brings me to the next point, and that is I took the advice of some of my subscribers and added washers onto these screws. You will see that I've used a ton of different screws on this pegboard because that's all that I had left. And because we're using 3/4 inch material, you want to make sure that your screws don't go through the entire thickness of the material. Otherwise, you'll have screw ends sticking out of the other side of the board. And that's not going to be a really great thing, especially if you plan to move these around or reorganize your garage in the future. You'll have some screws poking out the other end. Now, because I left my table saw at the same angle as before, I went ahead and grabbed a spare piece of MDF that I had laying around. This is going to be my wall support. It was the exact width that I needed it for one side of my garage. I had 2 of these pieces, and so I raised that blade up exactly at the same angle, cut these down, and then I was ready to go ahead and hang these up on the wall. With the French cleat system, this side is going to be against the wall, and then the second piece is going to slide and lock this into place. And so what you're going to get is you're going to get this locking action to where it supports itself against the wall and it won't pull off of the wall. So to make sure that this pegboard was sitting at the right height for the workbench it was going over, I went ahead and grabbed the pegboard and mocked it up to the wall to give me a good reference point for the wall mounts. So if you're putting this up by yourself, screw in one of the sides of this support board, grab your level, make sure it's all set, and then do the right side, and make sure that these are going into some studs so that this thing doesn't fall off the wall. And once you get that right and left side put in, then you can throw in a couple more screws to make sure it's nice and secure. Now, to make things a little bit easier on myself for the top support or the top wall mount, I went ahead and grabbed my pegboard, mocked up the top wall mount, grabbed my pencil, and drew a reference line from where that board needs to go. Now, I will say that after I hung this up the first time, I had to take it down because it was about 1/4 of an inch off, and that pegboard just was not sitting super secure against the wall with that French cleat system. So if it's not super secure or the pegboard kind of rattles back and forth when you put it up, it would probably be a good idea to go ahead and get that reset so that it doesn't accidentally come off of the wall. Here we go. Here's a picture of the French cleat system holding this up. It fits perfect. It makes my garage very versatile, allows me to move my tools around. I'm really happy with it, and hopefully this can help some of you guys out. Again, if you guys could hit that like button and subscribe, I'm happy to keep making some content for everybody, and happy DIYing.